Hello everybody, welcome to Steven's Fight Show, and in this video we're going to be talking about Edgar Berlanga and his career thus far. Edgar Berlanga is a Puerto Rican fighter that is signed under Top Rank Promotions led by Bob Arum. He currently competes in the super middleweight division, and there is a lot of talk about him and his skills and his ability as a boxer. So in this video I want to cover a few things about his fighting style, his hype, his potential, and if he has a chance to become a world champion. So let's get into it. So first, let's talk about the hype. Obviously, if you look at Edgar Berlanga's record, he has a flashy record of 20-0, but specifically, he has 16 KOs where all of those KOs have come in the first round. It's not even really in the first round, it's pretty much 1 or 2 minutes. Pretty much from his pro debut all the way up to 2020, every single fight for him has not lasted for more than 3 minutes. He is somebody that possesses insane KO power that can knock anybody out with one punch. This dude pretty much has dynamite in his hands. If you watch the way he punches and the way he loads up his shots, you can tell that this dude is a natural KO artist. So with all of his dominant KO performances, people in the boxing world and Top Rank themselves have projected him to be a future world champion at 168 pounds. In 2020, where Edgar Berlanga pretty much finished almost all of his fights, or if not all of his fights, by first round KO, it has earned him the award of being the Prospect Fighter of the Year. Bob Arum, who's pretty much the CEO of Top Rank Promotions, has pretty much called him the next Mike Tyson, and he also believes that Edgar Berlanga could potentially be someone who can take down a fighter like Canelo Alvarez. And even Edgar himself is buying into his own hype, calling himself a monster. Now, being compared to Mike Tyson is not a joke at all. We all know how legendary and how great Mike Tyson was back in the day. So to be compared to Mike Tyson, that is a big game. That is a really big comparison. And to also be a fighter that can have the skills and the talent to take down a fighter like Canelo Alvarez, who is pound for pound one of the best in the world right now, is also something that is not considered light. So pretty much there is a lot of hype around Edgar Berlanga right now. People believe he's the next biggest thing. However, let's take a deeper dive into his last few performances, into his skills, his capabilities, and if he can indeed back up the hype that is around him.
Truth is, life stood still right there.
So let's look at his recent performances. So in his recent performances, specifically in his last 4 fights, he has had all his fights go the distance. Prior to all 4 of those fights, all of his fights have ended by way of KO in the first round. So through all those dominant 16 fights where he finished his opponent within 1 or 2 minutes, it didn't really allow the audience to see what kind of a fighter Berlanga is.
I mean, how can you really see how good a fighter is if you can't even watch one full round of him fighting?
So his true talent and his skills as a boxer was all disguised from that dominant KO run. However, recently, Edgar Berlanga has had a few fights go to the scorecards, and within some of those recent performances, fans are not pleased with how he performed in those recent performances. Performances against Alexis Angulo and Steve Rolls and even Marcelo Esteban Caceres has left fans wondering if he really has what it takes to become a world champion or the best fighter in his division. Many boxing experts and analysts like Tim Bradley have come out and also critiqued Edgar Berlanga's recent performances. And in my opinion, I also believe that Edgar Berlanga has not performed well in his last performances. Especially, in my opinion, he did not look great against Steve Rolls. Steve Rolls was somebody that was meant to be in there just for Berlanga to get the experience. This was a chance for Berlanga to showcase his talent, his skill, and who he is as a boxer. There were many questions about whether or not he could box, whether he can take a punch, and this was a golden opportunity for him to show who he really is as a fighter. And although he did win, in my opinion, I don't think he showed any improvements or any skills that can make us believe that he can really take it to the next level. Even though in my opinion he has improved from his fight against Steve Rolls all the way up to the Alexis Angulo fight, he's still showing rookie mistakes that leaves fans wondering whether or not he can become a champion at 168. And the scary thing is, he doesn't look overly impressive against these guys that he's supposed to beat easily. Because all these guys that are being fed to him, like Alexis Angulo and Steve Rolls, these are guys that are thrown in there with him so he can prepare for a potential world title shot. However, if you look at so many different greats in the sport of boxing, when you watch their fights when they were considered an up-and-coming prospect, whenever they were fed cans against them, they would always show that they were levels above that opponent. They would always show who they are as a fighter and where they belong among all the greats in the division. However, Edgar has not shown that. Edgar has shown that he still has a long way to go. And like I said before, he has made a lot of mistakes that has shown he is not that type of fighter that we all thought he is. So let's get into those mistakes. Something that Edgar Berlanga doesn't use enough is his jab, and he doesn't work off of it as well. In the Steve Rolls fight, he hardly jabbed at all. And even in the Marcelo fight, he didn't even work off of his jab. He would throw jabs, but he wouldn't really put any combinations behind it. Edgar also does not really focus on the body at all. In a lot of his fights, I see him headhunting a lot. Obviously, he's portrayed as a knockout artist, so he would naturally look for the head. But what I'm saying is he doesn't use the body to set up any punches. His combinations would never change as well. The reason for that is because he leads with power. He always wants to throw a big shot at his opponent. And because of that, he always throws the same repetitive combinations. It would always be a 1-2, left hook overhand, right hand left hook. It would always be a 2-punch combination or just a single punch with no setup at all, just to try to get his opponent out of there. And like I said again, he leads with power, so he often throws a lot of load up shots without any setups at all. No feints, no jabs, no punches to set up his big overhands, his big left hooks, his uppercuts. A lot of times you would see him throw shots out of nowhere without any type of setup, and you're left wondering, how is that punch going to land? I mean, it's very telegraphic, so chances are it's not going to land if you don't take your opponent's attention off of what you want to do. He also lunges in and has a hard time closing distance as a pressure fighter. When he would throw his jab, he would lunge in, leaving himself open too many times. Since Edgar has trouble dictating distance, he often lunges with his punches to try to get in range. However, we haven't really seen him pay for any of these mistakes because the level of competition that he's in there with has not been good enough to expose these mistakes. His timing and precision is also not too great as well. A lot of times, whenever you see Berlanga try to counter, the timing of his punches are always so off that it does not land at all. And whenever he lands, it never lands where it's supposed to land. It often lands off the side of the head or off the glove, or the punch would always just graze. It would never land clean. The precision of his punch is not there due to him rushing his combinations. And lastly, he has an inability to cut off the ring, and he cannot move both sides. If you watch the recent fight against Alexis Angulo, Berlanga was only moving to his left. He was barely moving to his right at all. And against the Steve Rolls fight, he was always following Rolls around the ring. He was always throwing punches of where Rolls was at, not where he was going to be. So with all of these mistakes and all of these not so good performances, is Edgar Berlanga world champ material? In my opinion, Edgar Berlanga has shown that he has the ability to box an opponent, but he still has a long way to go. He is making improvements from his recent performances, but they're not big improvements. They're not big enough improvements to where he can compete with all of the top dogs in the division. In his last fight against Alexis Angulo, he made better work of the jab. His jab was a lot more snappy. It was a lot quicker than the Steve Rolls fight. If you watch the Steve Rolls fight, all his jabs were power jabs. He also sought a new trainer named Juan de Leon, who gave him great corner advice during the Alexis Angulo fight, which can lead him to great places. Juan de Leon was explaining to him at the end of the 9th round, I believe, where he was explaining how he wanted Berlanga to box his opponent instead of fighting his opponent. And his trainer was absolutely spot on. I felt like in that round, Berlanga got caught up in wanting to exchange with his opponent, and because of that, he left himself vulnerable into getting caught with a bunch of uppercuts, straight rights, and big shots. So Juan de Leon told him that he needs to listen to him and box his opponent. So in my opinion, bringing in a new trainer was a great move for him. However, one thing I believe Edgar needs to correct, and it does not require skill or talent at all, and that is his behavior. One thing about Berlanga is he certainly does not have a world champion behavior. What I mean by that is during fights, it looks like he's not always 100% focused. In his last fight against Alexis Angulo, if people don't remember, he was trying to bite Alexis Angulo's ear. And in a fight, no matter how frustrated you are, or if your opponent was throwing a low blow, or if he was throwing shots in the clinch, you can't get mad enough to the point where you put yourself in a position where you could lose the fight. And in several of his fights, you can see him always complain to the ref about something. Like during a round, you cannot get caught up in other things. You have to fight at all times. The ref tells you at the beginning of every fight to protect yourself at all times. And you can't do that if you're constantly complaining to the ref about something that is bothering you. Sometimes Berlanga can get so frustrated during a fight that he doesn't even focus on going back to his corner. He might be more focused on talking trash to his opponent rather than getting back to his corner and listening to what his trainer has to say. And lastly, he also does not listen to the coach. If you listen to the corner advice from Edgar Berlanga, his coaches often tell him, don't load up, give me a straight right hand, don't fight with him, box him. And some of the time he listens, but most of the time he rarely listens. So these are little things that Edgar Berlanga needs to fix that can get him closer to a world championship. People say you become a millionaire before the millionaire gets into your bank account. And in my opinion, Berlanga needs to behave like he is a champion instead of
a cocky little kid who thinks he's nice.
Right now, I believe Edgar Berlanga will not be a world champion. But like I said again, he is showing improvements. And if he continues to improve on his weaknesses and his attitude, then I don't believe he should be counted out at all. But I'm not going to overreact like everyone else and calling him overrated just because he hasn't looked great in his last performances. And that is it, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to what I have to say. And drop a comment and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Can Edgar Berlanga become a world champion? Is the hype around Edgar Berlanga real? Will Edgar Berlanga have better performances moving forward? Now, if you guys can please drop a like on this video and subscribe for more fight content that relates to boxing, MMA, kickboxing, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel down below. And other than that, it's been Steven, signing out. Peace.